New World is releasing on October 15th, 2024 for Xbox, PS5, and PC. Wait, didn't New World already release like 3 years ago? Aeternum? New World Aeternum. Got it from the top. New World Aeternum is releasing on October 15th, 2024 for Xbox, PS5, and PC. I have close to 200 hours in the original New World, and I've been playing the open beta for New World Aeternum all weekend, and I've been having a blast. So today, I'm going to share 5 reasons I'm excited for the full release, 3 nagging concerns I still have about the game, and I'm going to help you decide whether it's worth trying for the first time or coming back. So with about 200 hours in the OG New World, I wanted to talk first about the things that I already really love about New World that the beta is making me realize New World Aeternum is doing as well, if not better. Number 1, for me, New World has the best gathering, crafting, trade skills gameplay loop that I've played in an MMO, especially for a solo player. I love running out into the forest, collecting what you need, coming back to town, selling it at the trade post, or using it to make things for yourself. This whole loop just feels great, and I spent a ton of my time in original New World just doing that for a gameplay loop. Forget about combat, questing, anything like that. Everything in New World that you do, whether that's gathering, crafting, fighting, questing, all of it gives you experience points, so no matter what you're doing, you're always making use of your time and progressing your character. So next up, sound design and world immersion in New World is top tier, and that doesn't change in New World Aeternum at all. If anything, like I said, it's actually better here. It's so cozy and beautiful wandering through the world in New World, hearing other players chopping down trees, just sitting by your camp, listening to the fire crackle. It's kind of rare that a game can hold your attention, especially an MMO, just living in it and existing. But there are countless times where I've just stopped and sat and taken in the world, and it feels awesome. Next up, the combat in New World. Now, I always was a fan of it, but it was a little bit janky, and it's not perfect by any means now, but New World Aeternum has really smoothed out some of the edges here. Everything's more responsive, the combat just feels a little bit crunchier. I'm really digging it here. I will say a concern from the community is that they've added lock-on for ranged weapons, which could mean some bad news for PvP in particular. That doesn't really bother me because I'm not a huge PvP player, but I know there's a big PvP community in New World, so you just might want to be aware of that the beta has introduced tab targeting basically for ranged weapons, which really takes away some of that action combat feel. The number 4 reason I'm excited for New World Aeternum is dungeons. So this is a little bit more speculative because we only had access to 1 dungeon in the beta, but having past experience with these dungeons, these are really excellent actually. Some of the better dungeons I've played in an MMO. I've always thought the dungeons in New World were really fun. One of my biggest gripes with the game was like finding people to actually play them with, but if you remove that, the actual experiences when you're playing them have always been great. So I'm just excited to play more of them in Aeternum, especially now that the game feels even more responsive than it did. Moving on to my 5th reason why I'm excited for New World Aeternum, this is really looking ahead into the future, what has changed in my open beta experience versus original New World. So there's a few things I want to talk about here. Number 1, the whole questing experience has been overhauled with character animations, cutscenes for quest dialogue. It's like what you see in a lot of single player RPGs. The character's actually talking to you, standing in a scene. You're also animated as a character as well. Everything from the get-go, including the initial cutscene that like sets up New World in general, just feels so much more engaging, and your character is front and center, which also feels much better than the original New World. Very importantly, this also means that I will likely dump at least another 100 hours into the game because it feels like a refreshed experience. Even though I'm going through a lot of the same story beats that I did before, having all of these fully animated characters and cutscenes, it just feels different and better and almost like a new experience altogether. Yeah, this whole overhaul really is something I think to be excited about for people who have played before. If you've only played at launch of the original New World, I think you're in for a real surprise if you liked the core gameplay. Next up, I already kind of talked about this a little bit, but all actions in the game feel way more responsive, from movement to jumping to combat. Everything just feels more polished and less like a beta, which is ironic considering it is a beta. But yeah, it's just smoother. It feels more like a finished game, which is really great. And then the last kind of new thing I've noticed here is a bit more on the technical side, but from a server architecture standpoint, I have had 0 issues hitting a queue before getting into the game on Xbox. It's been so smooth from that perspective, like 0 issues, 0 waits. It's awesome. I've read about some sharding that they're doing. Sharding will never not be funny, you know? But yeah, there is some sharding happening in starter areas to reduce queue times, so maybe that's helping, but I'm honestly not sure whether this is a server architecture thing that they've solved or it's just not a lot of players playing the game at the same time. I remember when original New World launched, I really enjoyed it, but one of the things that was an absolute hype killer was having to wait hours just to get into your realm. If anyone else who's played it, you know what I'm talking about. It really sucks. So for new players, if this can be smoother, It's going to go a long way to helping people stay engaged with the game and enjoying it. Okay, so that covers everything I'm excited about with New World Aeternum and playing the open beta, but I do want to talk about a couple of nagging concerns with the game that kind of span from playing the old game, also playing the open beta this weekend. So number one is kind of a plus minus depending on who you are, but for me, I find the identity of New World is confused at the best of times. Is it an MMO? Is it a persistently online action RPG? Like I said, this is kind of a pro for me because the game does stuff in such a weird combination that it feels very special. And so if the gameplay loop clicks for you, this is actually going to be a plus, but for a lot of people, they're just going to be confused by what the game's doing. This is something I'm kind of conflicted about because subjectively, it's actually awesome, but I think for a lot of players, it's going to feel kind of weird and off-putting. So just keep that in mind if you're looking at the game, trying it out. Number two is all about player bases. So one of the big questions right now is how long will an active player base sustain itself here? There are all kinds of group activities in this game, whether that's PvP or PvE. You've got your dungeons, you've got one raid, and I think there's another one coming as well. There's a PvP island being added with Aeternum. There's Outpost Rush and Arena. There's plenty of things to do with other people, but without an active player base, that really doesn't mean anything. One of the main reasons I stopped playing OG New World was I just couldn't find people to run dungeons with. I tried to find Discords and other things like that, and I just couldn't find people. It was really, really tough, and it just ultimately led to me burning out. Lastly, this is a bit of a nitpick, but I did notice this is like my 5th time around doing the level 1 to 30 experience just across the original New World beta all the way to this open beta. And one thing I noticed was the enemy variety type is really lacking in this game. The combat itself, again, feels much more responsive, it feels smooth, but with this lack of enemy variety, especially in this starter area, it does feel a little bit like just doing the same thing over and over again. So if one of your priorities is something with diverse combat experiences, I will say I don't think, especially in the early game, that New World really excels at that. Depending on who you talk to, some people are super excited about this, some people are very doom and gloom, having played the game for a long time and been left disappointed by the developers. I understand both sides of this. I'm sure I'll get a lot of negative comments below about concerns about the game, and I totally hear you and understand that. It's really just a matter of time right now. We won't know until we know. So now we have the most important question to answer, which is, if you're looking at this video, watching the game, playing the beta maybe, should you play New World? Should you buy it for October 15th when it launches? So there's two camps here, right? There's first-time players and there's returning players. I think most people would agree if you're a first-time player and you have fun with the beta, or you think the gameplay looks good, the combo of everything that's going on in New World looks like something up your alley, it's kind of a no-brainer purchase. If it clicks for you, you've got 100 to 200 hours of super fun game here. It's just, you might hit an endgame wall where there's a content drought. Again, we don't know what AGS is going to bring forward in the next few months after release. Could be that we get a ton of new content. I think the only way to responsibly look at this game is to assume it's a 100 to 200 hour game and then it's done. Don't expect anything more from it. So based on all of that, if you're looking for a laid-back online RPG with MMO features to dabble in as you play, New World could be perfect for you. The people who should skip are those looking for a long-term game that's more MMO than RPG. I don't have enough info or honestly confidence to say that there's a long-term future for the game, but I do know that if you buy it today and you really, really like it, you've got at least 100 hours of enjoyment. I don't know if I'm in a minority or what, but I've loved the open beta. I've always loved New World. I've just always recognized it as something I can't really rely on in its current state to be like a long-term ongoing game, but I jump in, jump out every time there's a new significant content update, and I really do have a blast. Moving forward towards the launch of New World Aeternum, I'm definitely going to keep making content around the game, specifically around the launch of the game. So if you enjoy content like this, definitely consider subscribing to the channel. We'd love to have you. And if you're not sold on New World Aeternum yet, no worries. Check out this playlist right here for all of our content on Starfield. That's a big focus for this channel. It's not the only game we cover, but we've got a lot of content on that here. Obviously, New World and Starfield aren't exactly the same, but I think there's some weird similarities there, so you might want to check this out. I'll see you in those videos there in just a second. Thanks so much for watching. I'm Dylan. This is Beep Boop Loot. We'll see you in the next one.